Alright, async and await. How do we use them? Well, we have this code here which is promise based, so it just calls two functions which return a promise, and it's using the then callbacks that you've seen, and also a catch one to handle any errors. But the problem with this and this kind of approach is you can see how at the moment we've only got two nested then blocks, but this could have three nested then blocks or four nested then blocks. You know, it can get really complicated, and we're doing some trivial stuff here, just calling one line of code or doing something super trivial like this, logging something. But if you're doing complicated stuff here with multiple lines of code executing, it could be quite complicated, quite hard to follow. So a cleaner way of doing this is using the async and await keywords. Now, the code will behave in the exact same way. The async and await is just syntactical sugar for promises, or the then blocks like this. So just to run you through this code real quick, just two simple functions. This one's mimicking a login system where you pass in a username and it will just return that user. Currently I've got it so that if you pass in that username, it will return that user, just some object I created there. If you don't pass in that username, it's going to replicate a login failed and it will just reject the whole promise. So this function underneath just sets a last login property. That's all that does. So it's essentially replicating some sort of login system. You get the idea. But you can see we call the login function, pass in a username, and then we do something with the returned user that this login function gives us. That currently is just setting login time, like you can see there, just sets a login, a last login property, and then we just log it once that's done. So, like I said, it's not very nice. There's multiple then blocks here, and it's just a pain to follow. So let's use the async and await keywords. Now, the use of the async keyword has to go inside of a function, an async function. So you can't just await here, you need to be inside of an async function. So what we'll do is say function, my func, whatever you want to call it, and then we'll run this code. Now, we can't just write await login like this because the use of the await keyword needs to be inside of an async function. And it's real simple. All you need to do is start the function with the keyword async. Now, if you're using arrow functions, or that's the syntax we're used to, it would just be something like this. Const my func equals async like this, and then you just put your async function. But that's okay, I'll just use the function keyword for right now, you get the idea. But anyway, so we've got our async function now. Now we can use the async keyword. So all I'll do is call this login function, but I'll await the result. I'll say const user equals await, and then login. So that's login like that. And now I'm going to pass in this username because I've got it set that if you don't pass this in, then the promise will reject. So we'll pass in that username, and then what I'll do is just log this for now so you can see it. So if I log user, and what I'll also do is comment this code block out here so it doesn't run that. So at the moment we're just calling the login one. We're not going to do the rest of it just yet, but I'll call that one and let's see what we get. So if I refresh this, oh, I need to call the function, don't I? So we've declared the function, but we haven't called it. So what I'll do is underneath that, I'll just call the function like that. Okay? Anyway, so I refresh that, and you see it's given us this, this user object now. Great. So what do we want to do next? Well, what we can do is carry on with the rest of this. So in this block up here, you'll see what I was doing is once I had that user returned from the login promise, we passed it into the then block and we just called this set last login time one. So let's go ahead and just call that function. Let me comment that out once more. So underneath there, instead of logging the user, what I'm going to do is change the const to a let so that we can update the user property. And I'll just say user equals await, and then I'll call this last login time function, just like that. Okay, and now what I'll do is log that, and you should see the user with the last login time property. You see here before I've called it, we don't have it. Let's just see if we have it now. We should. So I'll refresh this and I'll expand that. And you can see we've got the first name, last name, and username properties as normal. But now we also have this last login property. So you can see it's much cleaner than the way we did it before. Now, what about catching errors? Now, you can do it the exact same way. You can just stick a catch block on there. It will do the exact same thing. So you can do, if you're used to this, you could just you know, put your catch block and do something with the error as normal. It would still work, but then you're kind of mixing patterns. You're kind of mixing the async and await style with the then block kind of style. So it's probably best not to mix them up, although it would work. So what we can do instead is use a try catch. So what I'll do is declare my try catch. So a try catch block, put that in there, and I'll just move my async code into there like this. And then, if any of those two throw errors now, or so that would be if their promises reject, it means it would end up in this catch block. So from there, I can just log the error, or you can do whatever you want. Show your error UI to the user or something. It's up to you. So let's try that out. It's inside the try catch block. If I refresh it now, it will still work. We're not actually seeing anything, but that's because I got rid of the log. So let me log the result of that real quick. So if I log user, it will still, you see the same thing, okay? But now if I log in with a different username, which will make it fail, so some of the username which doesn't exist, you'll see it should hit this console.log. And just to be clear, and make it a bit clearer, I should say I can log that error word first. So now we get the two logs, error and no user found. And no user found comes from here. So I'm rejecting it with that error message. So anything you pass into the reject still ends up in the catch block. So yeah, so essentially we've converted this big ugly code block here with all the multiple thens, which is kind of difficult to follow, to a nice simple try catch with a couple of awaits inside. So yeah, that's it. The async and await is much easier, it makes it much easier to follow. The only thing is, don't forget your await block, because if you don't have await here, then what this does is that's returned the promise. So if I just log this real quick, user wouldn't be that the result of this function, it's going to be the promise itself. So let me just refresh this. You'll see it's the actual promise itself. I suppose that's been rejected. Let me just put that username back in. So if we don't have the await keyword, then it's returned the promise, and now user would contain the actual promise itself, not the user object. So do make sure you remember to use the await keyword. And that's it. That wasn't so bad. See?